last but definitely not least, hello to my co-host for this Friday, as he is for most Fridays, the great Peter King. Hi, Peter.
Mike, good to see you again. And I was reminded yesterday when Tom Pelissero wrote about Kyler Murray, I was reminded after I left the scouting combine this year, and, I talked to enough people at the scouting combine to know what Tom Pelissero's conclusion was yesterday and what became a headline. And I wrote it about 6 weeks ago, which is that it is extremely doubtful that Kyler Murray will play this year for $5.5 million. He's too small. He gets hit too much. He's playing behind a suspect offensive line. He's not going to risk his career, I don't think. And I said it and wrote it at the time. And I think it's the absolute truth that Kyler Murray, in order to play football in 2022, is going to have some sort, either a new contract or an adjustment, even though, Mike, I think that the majority of people who have watched Kyler Murray, especially at the end of seasons, would say, maybe we want to see a little bit more.
Well, the reality is Kyler Murray had an ankle injury in that Thursday night Week 8 game against the Packers very late in the contest, the next to last play of the game, or penultimate for those of you who prefer the fancier phrasing of the term. But he wasn't the same after that, missed a few games, came back, and just didn't move like he did. And when you take the mobility out of Kyler Murray's game, right, he all of a sudden seems a hell of a lot smaller. He can do a lot less. He's not a pocket passer, never will be, because he can't see out of the pocket. And I know the Drew Brees approach is there's angles and there's lanes. Kyler Murray is smaller than any of the short quarterbacks. He's smaller than Russell Wilson. He's smaller than Drew Brees. I interviewed Kyler Murray the same day I interviewed Russell Wilson 3 years ago at the Super Bowl, and it's noticeable. There is a much more compact and slight and shorter frame to Kyler Murray than Russell Wilson, who was regarded for years as a short quarterback. And, if 6 feet is regarded as short, so be it. But when most of the quarterbacks are 6'5", 6 feet is short. So I say all that because the Cardinals and Kyler Murray have, I think, two challenges right now, Peter. The first will be reaching an acceptable value, which is not going to be easy. Not easy at all. The second challenge is figuring out when they're going to try to reach an acceptable value. That's the problem for now. That's what spawned the report yesterday, the front end of the report that resulted in the back end observation that he's not going to play under a new contract. The idea that the Cardinals have yet to even make him an offer. And that Eric Burkhardt, who represents Kyler Murray and who clearly believes that, number one, the market for franchise quarterbacks is high and needs to go higher, and number two, his guy is one of them. That offer that he previously made to the team has been yanked, and why not? The market has changed. The world has changed. Everything has changed in the past couple of months. I'm told that the Cardinals' position is we'll take care of him this summer. I've seen others say this, and I agree with it. He wants it now. Not because if it's not going to happen now, if there's going to be a $10 to $15 million per year gap, which there very likely will be, I could see the Cardinals being between 30 and 35 million and Burkhardt between 45 and 50 million. If we have an impasse here, let's do it now so maybe we can find a new home before the draft. Not in June when the depth charts are set and everyone has their quarterbacks, although there's still a chance some teams will still not have their quarterbacks come summer. That's where this is coming from, and it's not an accident, I believe, that this hits 2 weeks before the draft. Let's figure it out now, so if there's a trade to be had, it can be done between now and the start of the draft.
Mike, there's already 3 or 4 teams that have been taken off the list of prospective teams that he could play for. And look, as I listen to you, I think of two overwhelming thoughts, okay? Number one, there is one team that, in my opinion, Arizona would be wise to institute discussions with sometime in the next 10 days. And that just to see, and that's the Carolina Panthers. For a very simple reason. The other team that obviously, unequivocally needs a quarterback and needs him right now is Seattle. And we're going to get to this later in the show. One of the oddest contracts, one of the oddest pay-a-guy deals this year was the announced, anyway, 1 year, $7 million with Geno Smith, the backup quarterback who started 5 games in the last 7 years. And when he did start, he was not good, back in the day. But we'll get to that later. I don't want to confuse these two things. But, Carolina has the 6th pick in the draft. If they sit there and take Kenny Pickett, they're not in the Kyler Murray sweepstakes, on July 3rd. Okay? That's one thing. But the second thing, and this is, I think, really, really important. How many offenses in the NFL right now can cater to Kyler Murray the way Cliff Kingsbury would? That's why, to me, it is incumbent upon these two sides. I don't know if Kyler Murray is going to play for the Cardinals for the next 15 years. I do know that he should play for them for the next 4 years. Okay, because right now, that offense is set up for him. The coach is set up for him. And who knows what is going to happen down the road. But to me, he should stay in Arizona. They should figure it out for the short term. And then tomorrow is tomorrow. And let's figure out what happens tomorrow.
Look at that run. I mean, that's the thing. When he has his mobility, he
Amazing.
is one of the most dangerous weapons in the NFL. But the problem is he got injured last year, and he kept playing. It's a lot like what Baker Mayfield went through in Cleveland. And one thing that we learned this week when Mayfield opened up about his shoulder, and, at the time, guys aren't wired to say, I'm really injured. They don't want to make excuses, and they don't want to get yanked off the field. They want to try to play through it. But sometimes it becomes obvious after the fact that they were injured. Russell Wilson last year insisted on coming back as quickly as he could after having his finger completely twisted up into knots in that horrific photo of the pin that held his finger together.
Yeah.
He was never the same last year, and no one should have expected him to be. Same with Murray, same with Mayfield. And I mentioned Mayfield, Peter, because one angle that fascinates me, I haven't written about this yet. We talked about it on PFTPM last night. Murray and Mayfield are extremely close. When I interviewed Murray 3 years ago, Mayfield called him 3 times. Murray kept saying, Baker's calling again. Baker's calling again. They are very close. And Baker is going through a phase in his NFL existence where he is disillusioned. He said it's an effing snake business at one point during the 90-minute podcast that dropped on Wednesday. And he feels disrespected by the Browns. And he surely thinks my reward for busting my ass last year and playing through my shoulder injury was they throw me overboard. So if Baker is saying things that would naturally flow from his current mindset to Kyler Murray's got to be thinking, I better take care of myself, because I think the common thread between Mayfield and Murray is, and let's go to Mayfield a year ago. Mayfield probably wanted 40, and the Browns probably would have paid 30. And they never even got to the point where they could meaningfully negotiate because they knew there was too big of a gap. That's where Murray and the Cardinals are right now, I firmly believe. There's too big of a gap. So the Cardinals are trying to kick the can as long as they can and hope that Murray's expectations will settle down later and they can do a deal. And he'll realize, like you're saying, his best place is with the Cardinals instead of abandoning where he's familiar and comfortable and it's all set up to cater to him to a place where at a minimum it would take some time to cater to him. And he'd have to be patient, and the first year may be a little rough, and there may be some, why'd they trade for this guy, until they have the infrastructure in place to run the offense the way that it would need to be run under Kyler Murray. So I think the Cardinals are deliberately slow playing this because they think that time is on their side. Even though as time passes, the market keeps going up and up.
Here's the thing, Mike. 2 things. actually. Can you imagine if somehow, some way, the Arizona Cardinals were to trade Kyler Murray? What do you think they would do? They'd try to sign Baker Mayfield.
No.
No.
That ain't happening. What if you go, listen to the first half hour of the podcast? You never know with Mike. Period. That's the host. We figured that out yesterday. His name is Mike. Period. Used to be Mike Stud. Now it's Mike. Period. During that podcast, the Texas Tech experience when Cliff Kingsbury was the coach and Baker Mayfield was there and they wouldn't give him a scholarship when he started 5 games and then they made it hard on him to transfer to Oklahoma. I don't think Baker Mayfield's ever going to work for Cliff Kingsbury again. So that one's off the table.
Perhaps not.
Yeah.
Perhaps not. But, strange bedfellows are made when desperation or when desperate times come up. And I do understand that the last guy who Baker Mayfield would want to play for is Cliff Kingsbury. But would you rather be a backup in Atlanta or, a bad team? Or would you like to start for a team that could make the playoffs on a short-term deal? So, again, I do understand what you're saying. But in my opinion, in the NFL, never say never. But there's one other point about what you said, and that is that I think when you look at the way quarterback is played in the NFL these days, and it isn't that you don't have some malleable coaches and some people willing to play in different ways, but I think Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray are both quarterbacks who are not going to fit in every system. And they're not going to fit with every team. So you just look at it and you say, in some ways, in Carolina, it would be Kyler Murray into the square peg into a round hole. They'd figure it out. But I do think that you have to look at what fits as well. And that, to me, for both those guys, Kyler Murray fits. He fits in Arizona. They've got to work this out, no matter how happy or sad Kyler Murray would be.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.